President Laura Rosenbury was inaugurated last Friday, 8 months into a tenure in which students, faculty, and civil liberties organizations have criticized her for suppressing pro-Palestinian speech and academic freedom. Before, during, and after the inauguration, tensions on campus were high, as students picketed outside Riverside Church, interrupted Rosenbury's inaugural address, and later coalesced for a larger protest, unrelated to inauguration, outside Columbia's Broadway and 116th gates. The day ultimately culminated in 3 protesters being arrested by the NYPD and an additional 12 being charged with disorderly conduct. On the day of inauguration, spectator photographers and videographers were scattered throughout the area around campus, documenting the inauguration and the protest. Here, their footage is compiled to create a timeline of the day from before the inauguration began up to when the NYPD started to take protesters into custody. In preparation for the day's protest, Columbia limited access to its Morningside campus, beginning at noon on Friday. For the first time since the protest began in October, the university closed all access to its main gates on Broadway, making CUID holders enter campus through one of the auxiliary gates. Around the same time, the New York Police Department also began to elevate its presence as dozens of officers, police vehicles, and at least one bus from the Department of Corrections arrived near campus. In the past, pro-Palestinian students have criticized the university for heightening the police presence near campus when a protest occurs, saying that it is meant to intimidate protesters rather than protect them. These criticisms have grown in recent weeks, as students have called on law enforcement to make arrests in relation to people allegedly being sprayed with a hazardous, foul-smelling chemical at a protest on January 19th. An hour before the inauguration began, more than a dozen pro-Palestinian students and faculty gathered outside the entrance of Riverside Church, the venue of the inauguration, in a protest organized by Columbia University Apartheid Divest. Shepherded by law enforcement within a fenced area, the group voiced their objections against, quote, the inauguration of new Barnard President, defender of Zionism and enemy of academic freedom, end quote, according to a flyer distributed by CUAD. Throughout the protest, the group brandished Palestinian flags, handed out pink slips declaring a boycott of inauguration, and held chants accusing Barnard of complicity in genocide and the mishandling of student protests over the past few months. The demonstration came after an Instagram post by CUAD and Columbia's chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine, demanding that Rosenbury, quote, stop her blatant censorship of both faculty and students, end quote, and, quote, call on President Biden and all other government officials to support an immediate ceasefire, end quote. Starting at 2 p.m., Rosenbury's inauguration began in front of a crowd that was sparsely attended by students, after CUAD and Columbia's chapters of SJP and Jewish Voice for Peace all called for a boycott. Throughout the event, speakers referenced the unease on campus and affirmed Rosenbury's credentials to tackle the difficult political moment.
This is not the easiest moment to assume the presidency of Barnard, but I have great faith in Laura's intellectual prowess, her commitment to undergraduate education, her strong moral and ethical compass, and her belief in the value of intellectual pluralism.
Upon beginning her inaugural address, Rosenbury was interrupted by 10 protesters scattered throughout the audience who stood up one at a time to criticize Rosenbury. Rosenbury smiled at the protesters and addressed them by saying, quote, feel free to speak, end quote, as security personnel escorted them out of the building. After all the protesters were removed from the premises, Rosenbury proceeded with her speech, emphasizing the importance of fostering the civil dialogue on campus.
We will strengthen our community by looking at what we and so many other colleges and universities have been through these last 4 months, the pain and the challenges we continue to face. We must commit to disagree better, to live up to Barnard's history and our unique position as one of the most diverse institutions in the country in terms of different demographics, lived experiences, and points of view.
An hour after the inauguration began, demonstrators gathered en masse outside Columbia's gates for a separate, quote, all out for Palestine, end quote, protest organized by CUAD and Within Our Lifetime. In support of students affected by the alleged chemical attack, the rally was open to the public and brought hundreds of pro-Palestinian advocates, as well as a small cadre of pro-Israel counter-protesters. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators led chants criticizing Israel's military action, Columbia's alleged complicity with Israel's actions, and the NYPD. Over 100 organizations endorsed the protest on Instagram. Law enforcement presence was abnormally high, with scores of officers patrolling the event and confining participants within metal fences outside the 116th and Broadway gates. Once demonstrators began marching around campus, the police followed and made multiple megaphone announcements ordering them to stay off the road.
If you do so voluntarily, no charges will be placed against you. If you remain in the roadway and refuse to utilize the sidewalk, you will be placed under arrest and charged with disorderly conduct.
The NYPD arrested 3 protesters over the course of the day and charged 12 with disorderly conduct. Onlookers reacted with outrage, chanting phrases like, quote, "let them go," end quote, and, quote, "NYPD, KKK, IOF, they're all the same," end quote. In the hours and days following, pro-Palestinian groups criticized the police crackdown against protesters, sharing photos and videos of physical force used by officers. SJP and JVP have also accused Barnard and Columbia of hypocrisy, highlighting both institutions' recent celebration of past social justice movements as they face criticism over their handling of current protests. In a post regarding the arrests, CUAD said, quote, "Our freedom of speech is threatened with extreme violence. 3 Palestinian students were supposed to give speeches and were unable to use their voices. Armed cops with zip ties rushed anyone with a megaphone. This is blatant censorship, and Columbia is relying on the racist, vile NYPD to do so, with no care for the students injured or arrested in the process."